So let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to season number 3, episode number 9 of the Global Radio Ideas webinar series. Good to see you again. My name is Ken Benson from the P1 Media Group. We specialize in providing consumer and market insights to major radio brands and media companies throughout the world. And joining us from Stuttgart, Germany, the home of Benstown, a global leader in imaging and production, this Big Cheese, the CEO, Andy Sandeman, is in the house. And we're bringing you live people from 3 continents today. Joining us from Sydney, Australia, where it's an early 4 a.m. local time on Friday, our special guest who we're going to introduce to you in just a moment.
The man from the future, so to say. So, guys, it's so great to have you on. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. How to be creative, have fun, and create 2 massive radio brands. What can we learn from radio in Australia? As always, the chat box is activated. Let us know where in the world you're watching. And if you have questions, just post it. And we promise our guest is going to answer all of them because he has like a lot of time because we said it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So his day is going to be a long day for him.
All right, just a few more shout outs. People from all around the world today: France, Northern Ireland, St. Lucia, Atlanta, Georgia, UK, and much, much more. So thanks for being here. We appreciate it. So let's tell you about our guest. He grew up in Glasgow, Scotland, where his father worked at Radio Clyde. So following in his footsteps, he quickly moved up the ranks and landed his first PD position in Kent, England, followed by programming the legendary BRMB in Birmingham. And due to the enormous success he had there, he was elevated to the regional program director, and then off to the biggest market in the country, London, where he was named chief exec and program director at Virgin Radio. And then after that, if he can top that, he did. He went to Global and was the program director of the world famous Capital FM, and also was the programmer for XFM, their big alternative radio station. So once the UK was conquered, he moved all the way to Sydney, Australia, and was named the group program director for the Nova Radio brands and the Smooth Radio brands. And he's got some great stories and some amazing success that he's going to share with us today about how he built both of those networks into massive brands in Australia. So please welcome our guest this morning, where it's a little after 4 a.m. now. Say hello to Paul Jackson, live from Sydney.
Thank you. What a lovely build-up. Nice to be here. And yeah, as I was saying, when you work in radio, you're used to being up at 4 a.m., flying all around the world and doing various trips. And being a Brit living in Australia, I tend to get up for a lot of football matches early anyway. So I've no excuse. I'll be fine.
Oh, Paul, thanks for being here. I know that's a commitment, so we really do appreciate it. So before we jump into the tough part of the webinar, I'm going to kill you with questions. Let's begin with my favorite part. Tell us something that people might not know about you.
Okay, well, I went for something a bit different. You're looking here, a new little invention called the Pool Tree. I guess in radio over the years, of course, we all come up with lots of promotions for clients and do things for other people. But my wife and I have come up with this, what we call sort of solution to a problem that we were having. And we think probably lots of other people, therefore, will be having it too, which is at home. And it's maybe more of an Australian and an American thing. You know, when you've got the swimming pool, the kids are leaving all the towels over the sort of pool fence, so they're on the floor, the rashes, all that sort of stuff. You know, it was always a nuisance. We're always complaining it, picking it all up and everything. So we always felt there was no home for, you know, all those things. So between us, we created what we call the Pool Tree. It's your safe, stress-free summer, and we're about to launch this product in the next few weeks. So you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, Facebook. It's at pooltree.com. And we're getting a great reaction to it so far. So something very exciting and very different. And we haven't really talked about this to anybody yet. So to a lot of people in Australia, when they eventually watch it, it will be new news. So we're very excited for it. We're still waiting for summer to arrive in Australia. Then we might sell it to you. So hopefully that will come. We haven't timed it too badly. But that's something very exciting that we're working on right now.
So maybe one day we'll catch you on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank or.
Exactly. Yes. That's the plan.
That'd be cool. All right, let's get to the real questions here. As you know, I've been an international radio researcher and consultant for around 20 years, and our paths have crossed in Australia. But when I first started doing this job 20 years ago, it seemed like people, especially in Europe, where radio really started to proliferate in the 80s, looked to the U.S. as the role model and was doing the best radio at that point. But that certainly has changed. That perception has changed. over the last 20 years. And now in my travels, when I meet our clients, radio people, they talk about Australian radio and they talk about how good it is. And I mean, there's incredible talent there, as you know. Some works for you, but I mean, people that are known outside of Australia, like Hamish and Andy, Kyle and Jackie O, Fitzy and Whippa, who work for you, and even a fellow UK guy, Christian O'Connell, left London, went to Melbourne, and this is the #1 morning show, breakfast show in the city. So what is it about Australian radio today that keeps it creative and makes it so darn good and interesting?
Yeah, it's interesting. Good question, really. I felt that even working in the UK in the 90s, we looked a lot to Australia and some of the creativity that was coming out of the country. I think there's a lot of reasons kind of together, really. I mean, having lived here for 12 years now, I can tell you Aussies have an amazing zest for life. It's a very vibrant culture here. I think the people overall, just don't take themselves too seriously. They're all very much up for a laugh. And they love conversation, they love the banter. So I think radio reflects that really well. The sorts of people therefore on the radio are very, very talented and very creative. And all these guys we're looking at there, they're all risk takers. They do a lot of fun stuff, but they're very bright individuals. They know their audiences inside out. And of course, they're all household names, because most of the people there, Cushion's been in the country 4 or 5 years and ingratiated himself fantastically into Melbourne. It was just fresh. And so it's a market where the audience will give things a chance and they're up for something different. So you really can launch stuff here, and if you get it right, connect and be authentic, you'll go well. But most of the other talent have been around for more than 10 years, 15, 20 years in some cases, have a real sort of history. So there's an exceptional connection I think they've all got with their audiences. And they're very much big here, comparing it to the UK, they're very big on personal stories. They basically live out all their private lives on air, sometimes showing a lot of vulnerability and sharing too many stories, you could say, And they're all great storytellers, a real sort of discipline between these shows, because most shows in America in Australia have 2 or 3 or 4 different hosts in there at the same time. So it's quite disciplined in that everyone knows their roles. If you're the one that's better with callers or the storyteller, the conversationalist, I think the disciplines and the strength of the shows, they're very good at articulating that. And certainly here, I would say none of the shows ever take their audiences for granted. They all work extremely hard all year round, which is why we have about a 6 or 7 week hiatus where every show disappears throughout the entire summer, and then they're back working all year round. And at the other end of the day, interestingly as well, the drive time slot, and it's generally 4 till 6 in this country, is much like the breakfast show as well. Again, they love the chat, they love the banter. So it's 3 big national drive shows that are all comparable to breakfast shows really anywhere else in the world. And I find during the daytime, of course, it's music first, and you expect that. But there's still a lot of sizzle moments, really big talkability moments. Competition's always happening. I think also just getting out and about and connecting with the audiences here is a very big thing. So it's as strong as it ever was in terms of connection. If there's an event happening, in one of the big cities here, or even you go out to sort of regional radio, there's a radio station there attached to it. There's a radio station, sort of doing something. So you do feel, I still have the sense here that for a lot of people, if you're not listening to the radio, you're missing out. We've still sort of got that sort of feeling that maybe some stations or markets have lost over the years. So say exceptional connections as well.
Very different from the rest of the world.
And Paul, it sounds like what we're really hearing is it's personality and conversation that's really driving a lot of that connection. And very similar to what we learned on the last 2 webinars with the Now Radio guys in Edmonton, Canada, that they're dominating the market with a conversation-led music format. And
I guess that's we're a version of that. It's very much like that. It's not really sort of, maybe once upon a time it was bits and stunts and things, but it's not really. It's got, I'm saying, much more sort of intelligent, sort of led presenters doing your very creative stuff, but really great, drawing you in conversations. You can listen to some of these guys genuinely for 10, 15 minutes without them taking a breath, and it's very compelling. It's generally very well structured. Within that, music's very important too. They get plenty of music away. So certainly that balance and that mix, it took me even a little bit of time to get my head around when I first started here, that at drive time, going, so we don't play that much music and it's all conversation. And you soon get in that way of life. And I think it just fits with the kind of, as I say, that zest for life, that culture, that kind of just get stuck in, have a laugh, not take yourself too seriously kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really, really strong.
Fantastic.
So spinning that wheel a little bit back. So early in your programming career, Paul, you served, as Ken mentioned before, as chief executive and program director at the original Virgin Radio in the UK. So what was your experience like? And tell us about working with obviously one of my personal heroes, Richard Branson, and his challenger mentality. So what was it like?
Yeah, well, I can remember the original Virgin when he owned it in the 90s. I think it started about 93 because it was in excessive in the launch street doing Born to Be Wild. Yeah, I still remember listening to that. I loved it. It was Russ and Jono doing the breakfast. John O'Coleman, of course, sadly passed away a couple of years ago as a great guy. But I think one of the first campaigns they ever did at Virgin was a big, massive naked billboard of John O'Coleman, which came down very, very quickly. So it's a very Virgin thing to do. I suspect it was a deliberate thing as well, yeah, because they knew it would get banned and get loads of publicity. And then years after that, of course, it went to the Chris Evans breakfast show. So going from Russ and Jono to Chris Evans, and he's absolutely, especially at that time, so groundbreaking, so different. Everybody listened to it. It changed the game.
Wow.
It really did. And he's still doing a fabulous job. He's on Virgin Radio in the UK now. It's reinvented on DAB. He's still doing a great job to this day. I think, to your question, sort of the Richard Branson philosophy that's carried on throughout the years, and all my time there, was that kind of free spirit. We can do anything, you know. They always saw themselves, I think, especially in the early days, as sort of sticking up two fingers to the establishment. In particular, that's the BBC, really. And it was a very commercially minded, very creative place, but it had that kind of fierce, really, we're independent kind of spirit. And it was the first station to give away £1 million. Well, I think they managed to do it outside of a ratings period. So there you go. It was the first station to go live on the internet as well. There were lots of firsts back in the day. I remember them saying as well, you know, you don't actually have to be first. You just got to make people think you were first. It's just, you know, you had the idea, someone was doing it, they'd react quickly and do things. I can remember in Christian O'Connell's time there as well, because we worked together there from about 2006. We did lots of events. In my mind, a bit of a precursor for what we did at Nova with the Red Room. Things like Texas would play live on top of Tower Bridge, just stuff that's never been done before, that's got a bit of a wow factor about it. We had a lot of that. I think the highlight every year was the V Festival. And in that period, in the early 2000s, we've got artists like the Killers, Coldplay, Oasis, Kaiser Chiefs, and there was a lot of great sort of rock and roll music that really fitted for Virgin brilliantly. So those artists would all play the main stage, but then come backstage and play in Virgin's, going to call it VIP area, which is about 1,000 people. We used to always create this big swimming pool and have a Rolls Royce hanging out of it, which is so Virgin. You know, I think back now, it's utterly ridiculous. So I remember Richard Branson always being there for those and loving those. And of course, the artists love it. It gives you a great connection with the artists. And they end up playing huge sets backstage just for your own clients and your own staff. So it was, yeah, it was, and it still is, I think, as a brand. Obviously, it's expanded in so many different ways, but that early iteration of Virgin was super focused, laser focused. It really understood its audience, understood how to connect with them. As I say, just lived it through that rock and roll attitude.
Wow. Yeah, what a great brand. Not just Virgin Radio, but most of Richard Branson's brands have been successful using, I guess, that mentality, right? What do they call that?
I think that's the mentality. Yeah, absolutely. It's in your DNA at the start, as is for many stations. You can't really get away from your DNA, quite rightly. And I think, I'm sure that permeates to this day.
So let's go back to Australia, where you are now. You went there about 12 years ago from the UK for a big job working for Nova Entertainment and tasked with two big objectives. The first priority was to get the CHR network Nova out of last place. And you not only got it out of last place, but you took it to first. So, we got to ask, how'd you do it?
Well, there were plenty of days we thought we might not do it, because when you look back, it feels like a great journey. Because I haven't really thought about it too much. When you're in it, it's like, oh God, is it ever going to get better? Is it ever going to change? Yeah. So, I mean, look, when Nova first started, it was, I think, 2001 in Sydney. It was very, very successful. It was never more than 2 ads in a row. Sounds different.
Remember that?
Yeah, totally different philosophy. People loved it. It was great. I suppose over the years, then things changed, and the stereo and the competition were very strong. When I joined at the end of 2010, I don't think we were winning any demos in any of our markets. And the philosophy, I think they pushed themselves musically further to the edges. The philosophy was first on, first off. So I thought, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, we're first on the hits, but then we got off them really quickly. So it was a lot for me to get my head around. Coming from capital in London, you dominated hits and rinsed them, So there was that entrenched view. We can't win. We can't beat the big guys. We've got to be so different. So I think what I could bring definitely was a different perspective on all of that. From my reading of it, there were a lot of hits that weren't getting played. I thought actually at that time, Australia was quite an adult pop market and a lot of great songs weren't getting played. So I came in with a philosophy of, we're going to get the music right first. Obviously, there's a lot of shows and other things to change too. And an image is like turning around a huge juggernaut. It's going to take time and have a churn of listeners. So we had sort of a couple of years game plan initially. And with the music, first of all, it was about playing our own hits, just finding, again, different stuff, but very much in the mainstream. So there were sounds that were emerging that weren't getting reflected or getting played here. Where we did luck out was Ed Sheeran and the A-Team. That was just coming along, and we capitalized on stuff like that. And you look back now, and it's like Calvin Harris and Feel So Close, superstar artists that are household names played everywhere. In my first, I'm going to say 9-10 months through 2011, only Nova was playing those artists. The competition didn't really come onto them because they thought we were so poor, basically. So we got a run at really creating that kind of dancey sound, early Avicii, Swedish House Mafia, David Guetta, all that sort of stuff, and gave the station a younger, fresher, dancey sound. But really felt actually the older end audience, I'm talking 35 plus, probably would love a lot of this stuff too. So I think we were pretty satisfied in year one and made a bunch of changes to our sound with fresh hits was our position. And there was a real freshness about the radio station. But I knew that wouldn't be enough either. I think people were pretty satisfied, broadly speaking, with the other stations in the markets that they were already listening to. And they had a sort of set in their mind view of Nova being a bit too young and a bit too alternative. So it takes time to turn that around. So I guess one of the big things, I think this is probably a really big shift for us, was my desire for us not just to play hits, make hits, but to really own them and to be really famous for, that's a Nova song, and take ownership of the artist. So we worked really hard at relationships with artists, tried to leverage some of the relationships I had coming out of the UK as well. And I think that may have helped. So we created the brand called the Red Room, which has become infamous. And we've done hundreds of, if not thousands of music events over the years. And the Red Room effectively is like a red neon sign. And we dress as sort of a staging and an event in anywhere you want. We've done them in pubs and clubs. We've done them at the Opera House in Sydney. Taylor Swift did Hamilton Island for us with 80 guests. The very first one we did was in the Nova reception. I had to get on the tannoy to persuade some of the staff to come. It was for Ed Sheeran, but at that point, nobody had heard of him. So we've still got videos of that knocking around, that sort of extraordinary stuff. He came back, though, a few months later, did one of the first really big Red Rooms where it connected with the audience, and that was on Bondi Beach. Then we did it globally. Yeah, we did it's so many. I mean, Pink, Calvin Harris, Miley Cyrus, events in New York. We were flying listeners there. I think also living in Australia, people look to New York and LA or London to go there and see music events. It's wow. It's beyond money can't buy experiences. So we did a lot of that sort of stuff as well. And many big artists played more than one. We did 2 with Coldplay. I think we done 4 or 5 at the head. Sam Smith then played the Opera House. So initially it was like, even with some of the record companies and the artists, like, what's a Red Room? And you had to explain it. By the time we had Ed Sheeran do the Opera House, everyone's like, I want to do that. Yeah, literally. We had Sam Smith came to us going, I want to do that. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I think pretty quickly, and there's a lot of artists breaking. So we do a lot of, smaller sessions. Ones where listeners would come into the station, we'd do them all the different markets around Australia. So I think no one else could really compete with that. It just gave us a gravitas musically and an ownership musically that no one could really get past. And I think that was a real turning point for us. In that period, we went number 1 under 40. We started to really dominate the younger end that we hadn't before, kind of 10 to 17, 18 to 24. We got pretty dominant quite quickly. So the job then really was persuading the kind of adult end of the market that Nova was for them. And that's probably where it took a little bit longer. I mean, going into the product bit itself, our brand image was seen as being very crude. Nova was seen as a station where I wouldn't let my kids listen to that. It's the swear a bit, it's the bit, so we're not really for me. And so in our early research, that was quite frightening, really. It was a real sort of blockage to, I don't even think about listening to it. I wouldn't put it on. So we're getting a lot of that coming back. It was really funny to say now that we started to play the clean version of every song. I couldn't get my head around some of the swearing initially. It can still happen here. Quite different to the standard from the UK. So we cleaned up the music massively. And again, the audience noticed this again pretty quickly. Because believe it or not, we didn't always play the clean versions of all the songs. Incredible, really. And with the presenters, it was just about explaining to them why we couldn't be crude, why we didn't want to be too edgy, who the audience was that we're targeting, and what the new philosophy for us was. At that stage, of course, we're launching a lot of new shows. And I think sometimes, sadly, even good presenters might need to be changed when they're associated with images and a position you really don't want to be in. So in Sydney, the new breakfast show was Fitzy and Whipper, and they were two lovable rogues, if you like, but they were very, very family friendly, very funny, very engaging, great storytellers, all of that. They're still obviously doing the Sydney breakfast show today. So I think they really helped change the image and the tone. And I think a year or so into them, people are getting their heads around it, saying, this is different, this is nice. And then of course they've got the younger end loving the Red Rooms as well. So a picture started to emerge, and a new sound for us started to really, I think, connect with the audience. And then at night time we had Smallsy doing his show. And again, when I think back on it now, all these shows that we created 10 to 12 years ago, all still on air just now, pretty much. Wow. We've got a very similar lineup across the board. So I think that heritage now really helps.
That helps.
And he was fantastic for, again, ownership with artists. His big thing was you're getting so close to the artists. We'd roll out the red carpet for them when they were here. And he was like, we just want the artists to think, when they think Australia, to think Nova. So he was so close to artists like Ed Sheeran. I remember in 2000, it would be 15 or 16, when he flew in to start his tour. Smallsy's literally giving us a blow-by-blow account of Ed's plane's landing in a minute, Ed's in the taxi, and he's on his way in. And we had Ed come straight from the airport into the studio, even on the phone, on the car on the way to the studio, co-hosting the show live. We were good at making that kind of event radio, and really good stuff. And when you're in it, you don't really appreciate it. It's just you've got that energy, that momentum, that sort of drive for it. What can we do next? And being creative and making event radio. When you look back, you go, wow, how much great stuff we did. I think, I'm very lucky that the Smallsies, the Fitzy and Whippers, our drive team, they're all so passionate. They're all so engaged. Everyone really bought into everything we were trying to do. So I mean, making it, I'm sort of oversimplifying how well it went, but even you fast forward 3-4 years, I think there were plenty of moments where we're in a sort of dangerous period. We're going really well. We're kind of number one on the 40s in network. There's lots of green shoots. But when I think about the audience around 35 plus, particularly the female audience, I'm not sure everyone was still convinced Nova was for them, or even that they were that unsatisfied with another station. I think there was more using Nova. Our cumes were getting bigger and bigger. I think at times we'd have the number one cume in markets, but the share not necessarily following. So I think people are curious, using it more, especially at weekends. So I think that's an interesting sort of point there where you got to stick to your guns. And I can remember that. Should we be doing this? Should we change? Should we try some different things? And if you go chasing an audience, it tends to be when you fall over, of course. So we did stick to our guns, and we just kept, and you have to accept, I think, along the way, you build when you get to a certain level incrementally, and that's the only way you can do it. And we continue to do that. And then something I think still interesting to this day happened, that when I look back, I think, is it just a reaction to Nova? But the stereo stations as they were at Fox FM, Today FM, B105, in 2014 at the end of the year, and I guess they'd seen a lot of decline at the younger end of audiences, losing them to Nova. They totally rebranded themselves. They became Hit. So sometimes in life, when you don't really have to make changes. You kind of wait for the changes to happen around you, and before you know it, we're a few years into rebuilding and redefining Nova, and suddenly we're the heritage game in town. We've got the breakfast shows that have been on for longer. Nova's the kind of heritage name. And I think there was a shift then, and that was a moment for us to really double down on, playing the hits, doing great Red Rooms, doing really big, creative and quite smart tactics. Things like we did this thing First Class at 50K quite a lot. You and three mates, first class anywhere in the world. So you can get great imagery and creativity out of stuff like that. So we had real momentum. That's when I think we really started to fulfill all our potential, and the audience all came our way. So we got to a point, and this is 4 or 5 years, and our cumes had more than doubled from where we were only 3 years before. And I think now we're literally a million ahead of any other radio station. So it's a fascinating period, really. And then for the breakfast shows, for everything we did, we're very much living in the moment, with everything. I think such a kind of high octane, energy-based output that we were doing. Even so, the breakfast shows, it's a Friday. We're not playing Monday's breakfast show promo or talking about breakfast over the weekend, which would be the normal thing you would do. We're just in Friday mode, giving away things that were happening in town that night. That weekend was always sort of Red Room tickets to be won. We're very much kind of in the moment. And we're very good at that sort of stuff. And I think Nova still is, to be fair, very good at that today.
It's an impressive brand for sure. And we at Bensound be lucky to be like partially working with you guys on that brand too. So your other dynasty, the one you built in Australia, the other one, so it's like one is not enough for you. So the Smooth Network. So after a bunch of failed rock formats, you relaunched as Smooth, which is basically, and correct me, an adult contemporary, like an AC format that serves like Sydney and Melbourne. And you grow that from a 2 share to an 11 share and like to a number 1 like station, both metros. That's been then the older demographic, right? That's been like 24 or 49 or?
Yeah, it started out probably even older than that.
Okay.
And then it's evolved. So kind of looking at the original Smooth logo there, and we did start out as a relaxing AC station, and then we've evolved to all the way through to where we are today. We're a pretty up-tempo, feel-good station, and we sort of moved with the times. And even in Melbourne right now, 18 to 24 and 25-34, Smooth is the biggest radio station. It's a reflection maybe of music and where we're at these days, but it's such a broad church of people. It's gone so far beyond all of our wildest expectations. If we ever just rewind back right at the start, when we knew we were doing it, which is January 2012, we did do one piece of research just to satisfy ourselves there's a gap in the market here. And there was, but we estimated it being around a 6 or 7 share, would probably be on a good day 3rd or 4th in the market. We thought that was good, and we were kind of happy gunning for that. And that's our genuine outset position. I was quite shocked, coming into the market, because when I started, it was classic rock on those 2 FM frequencies. Before that was Vega, because I missed the whole thing, but I soon learned all about Vega. So we knew then coming into this and doing Smooth would have to be distinctive. We get one chance at this. We're going to be judged really early. But I said the really good side here is everyone's talking about it, albeit in a negative way. Before it launched, a lot of cynicism. But they're going to try it. So tell me, if it is really good, we can surprise them and kind of come above or beat their expectations, then we've got a really good chance. So I think a really important thing is to give yourself time, because that was January 2012. We launched on May the 21st, just after Mother's Day. I think we needed every single minute of those 5 months to get it right and to build it. And we did launch extremely well. So we had the name Smooth. We dallied around with calling it either Smooth or Easy. We settled on Smooth, and the positioner was your new place to relax. That was then going to morph into Sydney's easy place to relax. So we very much played on the easy, relaxing thing. And right at the start of January, I got this internet link to my home, and we're just rolling the music around on a secret link that myself and our music director could listen to. So even I was convinced in my head, and literally, I think Spotify hadn't even launched at this point. They launched about the same time as we did. So it was building categories on paper at home of what we're going to be playing, putting them secretly into a secret database that we didn't want anyone else to see. No one knew what was coming or what it was going to be called, and not even the presenters until the last minute. And that was really good. As I say, we needed all that time, because as we're putting the music together, it just wasn't clicking. It was either too old, it was actually too soft, even for a soft station. It wasn't cohesive enough. It was a bit bitty. So we really played around with it and do it very differently. We don't necessarily have a 70s category or an 80s category. We've really morphed it more on the sound, a feel, a style. And it's always very much been programmed on feel, on emotion. And that's worked really, really, really well for us. And then on air, our approach was really different to every other radio station. So our intention not to compete with all the big guns at breakfast. You've got Fitzy and Whipper going really well, but Carl and Jackie O and Amanda and Jonesy and WS. I don't think we're going to bring people out of those stations too easily to try us. So we focused really only on the weekends. We did put 3 very famous people, big name presenters from TV in at the weekends. And we had this idea to do superstar names at 4 o'clock on a Saturday and a Sunday. So we got, Banco Bublé initially for 3 or 4 weeks. Then it was Lionel Richie, Dolly Parton, Barry Gibb, Hugh Jackman, all the sort of great Aussie stars as well, all presenting their own shows, playing their smooth favorites. So we ran this thing, it's a good imaging piece of, and we got, in that first year, we used a lot of callers on, what's your smooth favorite? And helped to redefine and shake the station. So it's all about the weekend, everything just, that's where we could get people to try us. So obviously we had a lot of good marketing up, but telling people, hey, try us this weekend. That worked brilliantly well. And bearing in mind here in terms of the GFK and the methodology, that's about 25% of your, the whole weekend, 25% of your total share number. So just dominating weekends would stand us in good stead, and it did. I think within about 6 or 7 months, we were the number 1 listen at the weekends. And it was a broad church of people. It was people that listened to Triple J and Triple M going, it's kind of kitsch to listen to Smooth. And we got that image going pretty quickly. Then we moved on to the workday. I think at that point we knew if those people at the weekend who were loving it, and we had a lot of people who were disciples for it straight away. It was like discovery. It was like sort of the best kept secret. So I think word of mouth played a huge part in this, and then the work day listening followed thereafter pretty quickly. And then we hired great presenters with great voices, and they came from all walks of life. Our mid-morning presenter, Ty Frost, was working in our digital team, had a great voice, had done a little bit of radio before, and that's what we're looking for, your style. And our drive presenter, Byron, same guy that was doing it right at the start, was a teacher at Afters and coaching people on radio, but wasn't on the air himself. So we just found some really great people who actually probably thought they might never get on FM radio again, certainly not be on a number 1 station. But the way we pitched the station, even though the music, and there was some contemporary stuff in there, but broadly speaking, we're in the 70s and 80s, and a fair chunk of 60s music too. But we positioned it very contemporary in the way that we broadcast. We tended to, as if we're talking to mums with kids, that kind of thing. We never talked about the age of a song. So we never reflected, never went back to the past and everything. We're really strict on that, because the other competitive sort of gold WSs, had their 80s features. Every time they played something in the 70s or 80s, the DJ was reminiscing. It just sounded a bit older. So we wanted to sound contemporary and fresh and appreciating, actually, we're not really trying to target any particular demographic here. This is a lifestyle brand. We want all people from all walks of life to listen. You can be any age. This is your kind of music. So everything built on emotion and feel. It was all about relaxing, escaping, stuff to sort of sing along to. And then it was all about what's in it for the listener. The listener comes first. So the presenters were really well drilled on this is where we're not doing conversation, we're not telling stories, and don't put any thoughts in their head. They're coming here to relax and escape, so let's not make them think or have an opinion. And we're very good at executing that, I think, and that worked, I think, exceptionally well. And then things like competitions, we'd always go the extra mile. Smooth had a massive care factor, so if we were giving away concert tickets, it'd include food and drink. It would include the car to get you there and back, and we'll pay for the babysitter who've got kids. We did all those little touches, so there was a nice, consistent tone through the whole station. And I think Melbourne might have gone to number 1 first. It only took a couple of years, and it was certainly, you can see from that graph, initially every year up a share point. The cum grew even faster. So I think pretty quickly, I did feel that our expectations of being 3rd or 4th might be wrong, and we had a real chance of going number 1. But it beyond exceeded all expectations. And for me, it was a real learning curve. So when we're doing the music, I get very excited going, we must play this, take that song, or the chorus, what can I do? Our music director would be saying that they weren't hits here. And I kept coming across this thing of, oh my God. So I know it was a number 1 in the UK, but how did it go in Australia? So I learned every chart position, every song. And we ended up playing a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily a big hit here, even the first time around. I think that possibly gave us a lot of freshness. Then testing the music thereafter and years thereafter, a lot of that stuff had gone from not being very familiar to being top testing songs for us as well. So
Wow.
I think all that probably helped us. So where we've got to today really is that the Smooth brands are obviously pretty dominant in Sydney, Melbourne. They're on DAB in digital radio in Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth. But I think these days you find your radio however you find it, through your smart speaker or whatever. So there's a real appetite for it in those markets. And then, in 2000, I think it's 16, 17, we launched Smooth Relax, which is basically the original station on DAB, and we've got nearly 300,000 listeners on Smooth Relax. And Smooth FM itself now is your feel-good music station, and very bright, and you're playing a lot of sort of popular stuff, albeit from that predominantly 80s era as well.
Well, two extraordinary success stories. I mean, it's remarkable how you built Nova and the Smooth brand to really be dynasties in the country. So congrats. Just reminding you, we are speaking with Paul Jackson today. He's certainly a superstar programmer from the UK and Australia. If you got a question for him, we'll take questions in just a few minutes. All you need to do is go to the chat box on the right side of the screen and type your question away. So one more question about Smooth. I've always been really impressed with your TV ads. You spoke about Nova and how important it is to take ownership of artists and music. And you've done some amazing ads with Michael Bublé and then later Sam Smith. And many of these, if you Google on YouTube, you'll find them. But tell us how that happened. I mean, was that hard?
Funnily enough, no. Sometimes in life, it's the old thing. You've just got to ask the question. Ask the big, scary question. You might just get a good answer. Yeah. So the very, very first thing we did, this is, again, January 2012, when we pressed the green button on We're Doing Smooth, and knowing we wanted to aim high, the conversation inside was, if we could get Michael Bublé, because at that point, in the previous 3 years, he'd had the best-selling album every year, and had a lot of hits out, and the Christmas stuff going very well. He was barely getting any airplay on the radio at all. So that here comes a radio station that is going to play a lot of his music and really embrace him, and a great image, also youthful kind of look and feel. So I thought that would position us really well. So I went to a friend and industry colleague Tony Harlow, who was running Warner Music in Australia at the time. And he and I had a call with Bruce Allen and just pitched it to them just like that. Like, Bublé, obviously one of his biggest markets is Australia. You're not really getting any radio airplay. We're about to do this station. Here's a scope for a TV ad, and would you be interested in doing it? Literally, they came back within 24 hours and said, this is a great idea. Yes, we love it. They were in. So funnily enough, we had made the TV ad before we'd hired any presenters, before we had another.
Oh, wow.
We literally had the ad done, and that gave us a lot of confidence about how it might go. So it was actually one of the easiest things we've ever had to achieve. And sometimes the really sort of big ideas, can be the ones that aren't quite as hard. And what then followed from that, I think we moved from that a few years later to a Spandau Ballet ad briefly. And then Sam Smith was one of the few artists, I think, that was on Nova and Smooth, transcended all formats. Everyone was playing him. He was actually in the Nova TVC, which featured Ed Sheeran and Taylor and Katy Perry and all the usual suspects back then. And then we just had the idea of asking him to do it. And the idea for us really was keeping it contemporary and kind of really appealing to that younger and making sure Smooth wasn't seen as sort of an old station, an oldie station. And did quite a humorous ad with him too. And in that period, we're just picking up the tempo. So the idea of that ad is Sam Smith is partying in his hotel room and the woman next door is trying to relax. She knocks on the door and doesn't recognize it's Sam Smith. And he plays it out really, really well. And that worked exceptionally well for us. And then from there, we sort of moved our image into the more feel good. And so we engaged with Robbie Williams, who's absolutely massive in Australia, as he is everywhere, really. And we sort of went for a different ad using Earth, Wind and Fire, Billy Ocean, kind of brighter tunes, and quite a fun one as well. So we've always associated ourselves with a different artist that's imaged it really well. So it's very much brand first. It's the talent, obviously, very important in what they do. Within the Smooth universe, we've got Bogart doing the breakfast show in Sydney, Mike doing it in Melbourne. They're huge names. The research on them within their universe is massive, not necessarily to the broader market, but they're very important to us. But it's brand first, and it's Smooth. It's Smooth right. People listen to it. It's all about the music. So associating ourselves with music artists, I think, has always been sort of a smart way for us to go.
Yeah.
I guess the first point is don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you asked and you got it. And the other thing too, again, I want to recommend people look for these ads on YouTube because the production and the creative is first class. I mean, these are not made on a cheap radio budget. These are beautiful masterpieces.
Yeah, they are, and we're very, very proud of them. I think that was the thing about Smooth. Everything we did, it had to be absolutely top class. Yeah, and I think one of the things over the years is just maintaining, and it can sound boring, but maintaining our consistency. So much like Nova, the entire Smooth team on air are the same people. And a great thing of starting in a FM station, I'm very lucky to have had the chance in life to do that, is you're handpicking all the people behind the scenes. So again, it's the same team on air and off air across the whole Smooth network. So I think that makes it an absolute joy to have been a part of.
Well done.
Yeah, and there's obviously the guys who make parts of the brands, and that's kind of like my last question. Personally, I mean, there's some really outstanding and innovative imaging producers in Australia. A lot who I really dearly call friends of mine. So how vital has been imaging building your brands? I mean, maybe not just in Australia, but everywhere you went. I mean, also in the UK. How big of a part was that?
Huge. Yeah, I mean, so important. I think you can't underestimate it. It's the brand personality, really, isn't it? And, you know, some of our guys, Brad and Dan Pearson, we had Matty Dara before. So there's a lot of talented audio and imaging producers in this country. Konski over at SEA is very good. Ben Ryan at iHeart. There's a long list of people highly creative. It's one of the areas where I think we really excel here, and it's absolutely huge. We try to sound different from everyone else in that we have a lot of color, same humor and energy in ours. We keep it quite big, quite simple, so we're not ones for a massive crash, bang, whoopee, old sort of sounding effects. And very much music first. You respect the music, so song by song, as we sort of build in intros and everything, different treatment for them as we go. So we've worked a lot on the style over the years. And I think, again, even production-wise, we're quite conversational, but it's really punchy as well. So it's not kind of up and shouting in your face like a lot of stations are. And always constantly refreshing it. I do notice in Australia, quite a lot of stations, and not ours, but use a lot of different production voices and in different styles from show to show, which I don't really buy into, don't think works particularly well. I think it makes it much harder to have a brand sound, and it's like this show just happens to be on this station. There's a fair bit of that creeping in, I've noticed. But when you got them down the dial, even though there can be, unfortunately, more and more overlap of music these days, as we all sort of look to find different things to play. You when you land on Nova, you know you're on Nova. You know, the way it's put together, and that's right through to the imaging, plays a huge part in that as well. So very much got our sound. And Dan Pearson and Brad and these guys do a wonderful job.
Fantastic guys, fantastic, really talented imaging producers.
I think it's some of that inspiration and innovation that's coming out of Australia that's exciting radio in the rest of the world. So,
big part of it.
All right, so I want to do one last question. We are running a little bit long, so if we can. I know this is a big subject I'm going to unbox right now, but let's try and tighten up because we do have some questions I want to take. Yeah. So, you've been responsible for some of the most iconic CHR brands in the world. Just put on the screen, Nova in Australia, Capital in the UK. Clearly, everyone in a contemporary format's been complaining about the music cycle. The current music cycle's been lousy. So you being responsible for Nova, and how are you coping with it? What trends you're seeing? Is there anything we can learn, borrow from Australia that may help other contemporary stations around the world?
The word doldrums keeps getting used, doesn't it? We're in the doldrums, I think we're very lucky in the past decade, when I go back to all these red rooms and things we talked about earlier. We were in a very strong cycle musically with big artists and big names up until probably the COVID period. But of course, a lot of the big names are now very heritage and not a lot of names. So we've got the Lewis Capaldi, I think is fabulous. Lizzo, Harry Styles is a superstar, but there's less and less of that, and they've all been around for a bit as well. So we just live in different times, don't we? There's so many factors to this because there's so much choice for the consumer now. Even I find it quite stressful if I'm going on Spotify to find new music, and people probably just haven't got the time to go through all these long lists. So there's a real part for radio to play in that still, I think, for discovery, because we're also in a world where there's no mainstream chart. We used to do the Fresh 40 on Nova, and actually it's not nearly as potent or relevant as it used to be, but that was event radio on Saturday mornings. What was going to be number one was a big deal, and it just doesn't work like that now. So this kind of getting into uncharted territory. For us, I think we're in an era where we're kind of going territory by territory. What works in your market, understand your audiences, find your songs, and that could be different in different parts of the world. I mean, I think we were talking about Spotify before, and like on their sort of weekly top songs, about a third of it, and probably even more as we go forward, is catalog stuff, or there's a lot of ballads, or one artist comes in and dominates it. So for the average listener to get their head around what is a big song, and that thing we used to have day and date, didn't we, of release of songs. Radio would be playing them for 5 or 6 weeks before they went to the market. Those days are long gone as well. So I don't think necessarily people know what the difference. I mean, we talk about the difference between a brand new one and a recurrent. I think for the audience, they're grabbing them all at different points in time. So for us, I appreciate the kind of reflecting cultural moments bit. You know, when Kate Bush, Running Up the Hill, comes along from Stranger Things, a lot of people think that's a new song. We're very comfortable to play that as a current hit. There's that Sweater Weather. I've been testing this out on a lot of people. Sweater Weather wasn't a massive hit here in 2013, but we played it a bit on Nova. Now it's a current hit for us.
Yeah, it's a big one.
With our kids. I'm like, you know this song? Yeah, I love it. It's new. It's on TikTok. It's not that new, guys, but I know. And that's kind of the way it is. I mean, there's a Post Malone mashup of Cooped Up and Return of the Mac that's on SoundCloud. So we're out looking for stuff everywhere and going, we'll play that. That'll work.
It's very fragmented, right? So fragmented.
So fragmented. Yeah. And you've got to pad it out really with other familiar stuff. So when we're in a weak point, we'll change our clocks quite a lot and just go 1 or 2 more recurrents. So and again, seasonality plays into this. A sort of summer sound, we can reflect sort of big hits of the last few years a bit more. So we've got lots of different ways we'll run our music systems depending on where we're at. And sometimes we just get a little purple patch of a lot of songs testing well in a groove. At other times we end up, believe it or not, playing covers that we come across. Sergeant Slick did Gimme 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 and by ABBA, and it was a minimum of 50 favorite, huge tester for us here, and we just kept playing it to the point where I'm listening, sure this is right. But the audience, especially the younger end, loved that stuff. There's a cover of Superfly of Earth, Wind and Fire, September. It's a great song, and of course all these songs, and Smooth has benefited from this massively, are in so many kids' movies these days, and are just sort of seen on TikTok and various other ways. And part of how we put Smooth together also is running a lot of records that we know that are old that people think are younger and fresher than they are because they're in movies and so on, and very much established again. And so we'll find stuff from anywhere, and this market's big for pop rock. So that Banner song, I think, was used, Somebody to You, was used in a TV ad in America a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So that was a song that wasn't a hit here. We didn't really know it. We just came across it and decided, a song that's a couple of years old, that the record company aren't pushing, just to play it. We've made that a top testing song here. And there's a few examples of those ones where it's just changed the game for us and really helped just give us a nice balanced shape between the sort of mainstream pop rock, pop dance stuff that we're playing. So it really is, you've got to create your own set and your own sound. And Nova here tends to lead musically. If we add it, the marketplace will follow us. So we're always trying to stay just ahead of the curve, but also familiar and not too far ahead. And run our own race, run our own race in terms of our sound and the set of music we're playing. And we also here have to play 20% Australian content. Actually been a bit of a blessing at times over the years. That's been very hard. But we've got a lot of good artists now. So Kid Leroy's done brilliantly internationally. There's Australian, Dean Lewis, Amy Sharp, Guy Sebastian. So they all make a lot of really good, quite up-tempo pop stuff as well. So that's actually helped us in recent times. But I can't say it's not difficult. And I think that then goes to keeping the younger end really engaged.
I think similar to what Guy Zapolian told us on some webinars earlier this year about now that we're in this doldrums period of contemporary music, what he had done in his past programming careers did exactly what you're doing today, is going out and finding records that may not have been hits in your market. Maybe their songs just had good feels about, or they were in a TV commercial or a film, and you took them and made something of them to get us through this drought.
Yeah, I think for the younger format like Nova, I think TikTok is definitely a help, because there's so many older songs that are breaking again, and I know because of obviously my kids in that age, in that demography where you have people reuse these old songs over and over again for videos where you're like, I heard that when I was young, and they're back again. Like Kate Bush might be an example, but like the Return of the Mac thing was massive, and there's like so many like coming back.
And the production on those songs, the quality of those songs, you go back to like the early 80s to now, you can't tell the difference really. So even that Boney M, Rasputin was a huge hit here a year or so ago. But what it does, it really peps up the station, because a lot of the current stuff we're playing is often a bit melancholy or slower. So also trying to find a bright set as well. And just some of those songs, God, they really punctuate it. They really kick. And it just helps you keep that kind of feel good but momentum going. And people are tuning in to the radio, hear some great tunes and feel better about themselves in life and have a sing along. Yeah, so we can't take it all too seriously. And then sort of audience wise as well, there's quite a fragmentation really between, what the younger end teenagers sort of are really into these days and 30 somethings. And if you're Nova, and the way it is here, really, we're still trying to play to a very broad church of people at different times. Obviously, our set is much sharper, edgier, younger at night when Smallsy's on than it is during the daytime and at breakfast time. But again, we're somewhere in between and fresher at the weekends. And we run it a lot tighter at the weekends as well. That's where we actually really dominate. And that people are taking their kids to the Saturday morning sport, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of listening going on, but it's more short form. So we pretty much double the rotations and get rinse the big ones at that point. So it's kind of you adjust as you go through the week to different people at different times. But I'd appreciate that if we were 10 years ago when I started at Nova and we were really trying to win under 40, we'd probably be playing quite a different set of records to what we play today, because we're targeting a much broader church of audience and have a huge queue and trying to keep all types of people engaged and happy with it.
So Paul, that's a great jump off to our first question coming from Erica in Portugal. She wants to know, how do you manage to get youngsters to listen to the radio nowadays? And are social media, Spotify and YouTube a threat?
I don't think the way that you could view it is that. I don't view it as that. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. We see obviously still very high cumes at all ends, but especially at the younger end too. So we've got high engagement. But I know a lot of people and my own kids fall into this category that don't really listen to, say, Fitzy and Whippet at breakfast very often. It just doesn't fit into kind of the way their life is. But they're all across the show because they follow it on Instagram. They see all the clips. All our studios now have been remodernized, so everything is filmed, everything's video. So all the links and the conversation bits they're doing, we're chopping up, putting them on TikTok and Instagram and all our socials. So you can follow the show without actually listening to it on FM in the car, kind of thing. Right. So the engagement still is very, very high. I don't know what that means for ticking diaries or however the different systems work in terms of getting a number, but it's still very engaged. And I guess we've just got to go where the people are. I mean, on demand is probably the phrase and the way to describe it, isn't it? Of they'll listen when they're going to listen, when it fits in for them. And we've got, we talked about the Red Rooms before, a variety of those sorts of offerings. And we were first on Billie Eilish a few years ago. So if you really understand at that younger end what the really cool thing is, what the next breaking thing is, you're talking about it and reflecting it, you'll keep your audience engaged. But Smalls is great for this. He understands they want to win PS5s, Gucci bags, things like that, free pizzas, and does a lot of that sort of stuff. So they're in our orbit. There's a lot going on, and a lot of us love the shows and the sort of the conversational style of that as well. So it's a real mix of things. I think our expectation isn't that they're listening for as long as they might have been doing 10 years ago, and then of course there's so much other choice, but they're still definitely engaging, still using us.
Yeah. Brand is key here, I think. So last question from Zane Derbyshire is, how important is it commercially to have single brands, Nova and Smooth, across the different cities in Australia?
I think it's absolutely massive. I think this is the way it's going. There'll probably be music radio brands globally. I think we've gone from local through regional through national. It's such an advantage for us, I think, just for ease to really connect it with the audience around the country. Most of our competitive stations haven't got that as well. They're all still localized names in local markets. So we weave in and out of national programming and local programming, and it's very, very easy for us, as do our competitive stations. But other than through production idents, they're not really getting the station name in, where at any time it's always Nova. So whether it's a local or national feel, I think it's extremely important for us.
Great.
Consistency.
Well,
exactly.
Paul, Thank you. Thanks for getting up at 3 a.m. to join us at 4 a.m.
And
That's
stay
right.
until
I was
5.
projecting
until
clearly.
5.
Yeah.
Just give us the 30-second elevator pitch about what you're doing now in your new company.
Yeah, well, I spent, obviously, as we know, talking to Nova and Smooth, 12 years there as an executive over all the programming for Period Marketing too. So I've stepped back from that, still heavily involved with Nova and Smooth, more as a consultancy. So I actually get the chance to listen to it properly now. And I'm across to the music for them and working with the talent. But that gives me the opportunity going forward to work with a couple of other clients as well and do the stuff that I really love doing, back to where I started, just being in the creative side of programming. So I've started my own Paul Jackson Media business. I'll be doing something with the client in the UK very soon, and hopefully a couple of other things. I've done a couple of things with record companies, actually. I'm just advising on music. Which I really enjoy doing, and enjoying the future, and hopefully selling a few pool trees as well.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to hone in.
Entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. Well, good luck
Well,
with that, and thank you for joining us today, and being so willing to share about your wonderful experiences throughout your career.
Yeah, thank
My
you so
pleasure, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Also want to give a shout out to our producers behind the scenes, Susan and Robbie, that helped make this all happen, and of course, thank you for watching. A video of today's webinar will be available tomorrow on the P1 and Benstown websites and all our social channels and YouTube. So if you missed it, want to watch it again, share it. You can do that at any time, or see the entire series on demand at any time. So we're taking next month off. We always find people are too crazy in December. So we're going to be back in early 2023, and we're going to kick off our 4th season with an absolute superstar talent that most people probably never heard of. He's the host of the #1 morning show in Dubai on Virgin Radio. He's also an entrepreneur and influencer, and now he's a reality TV star. He's on the brand new Netflix series called Dubai Bling. And this guy, Chris Fade, is going to tell us how he moved to Dubai for 2 years. He's now been there, I think, 14, and how he's went from being just a DJ to this megastar, super really successful guy. So really how to grow your brand as a presenter. And that's going to be a lot of fun. Watch for dates. We don't have dates yet because he's actually going to be vacationing over the Christmas period into January in his home of Australia. So you know what that's like. You guys get a lot of weeks off during the Christmas season. So he's going to be down there for that. But it's going to be
I'm
great.
looking forward to it, yes.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah,
Chris Fade is just another level. I mean, this guy has literally worked, interviewed, shot bits with every superstar in the world ever come to Dubai, they go to Chris Fade. So that guy is an absolute superstar. Hopefully we'll have a promotion video ready so you guys can learn more about Chris. And if you find a star he hasn't interviewed and he hasn't chilled out or did something with, I'd really appreciate if you send us an email, because this guy is really phenomenal, unbelievable.
He's got a wax.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, can you tell him from me that if ever he wants to come back to Sydney, there's a job for him at Nova?
Yeah. Well, we can leave his wax figure in Madame Tussauds in Dubai, which is where it is. I mean, that's how big a guy this Chris Fade is. So we're really excited to have him on. Paul, thank you.
Pleasure.
Good luck with your new endeavor and with the trees. And
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
If I would have a
Thanks.
pool, Paul, I'd order one right away. But as I'm in Germany, it's always I don't have a pool. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
Paul,
I'll get one to you, Ken.
Okay,
nice,
thanks,
Paul.
guys.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
guys. Bye.
Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.